Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, the answer company. The division championship Minnesota Twins are looking to go all the way to the World Series in 2024. Bolstered by inspirational shortstop Carlos Correa, a healthy Brian Buxton, and rookie phenom Royce Lewis, plus a pitching staff led by Pablo Lopez and an outstanding bullpen featuring Johan Duran, the Twins are the best bargain in the major leagues, and Target Field is the best venue in baseball. Sheridan Dulas & Kins, PA, a family and criminal defense law firm, has been serving clients in Dakota County and throughout Minnesota for over 40 years. Ranked a Tier 1 Best Law Firm by U.S. News and World Report every year since 2009, Sheridan Dulas & Kins are here to help you in your most difficult life circumstances. Established in 2007, 45th Parallel Spirits was among the first 50 micro-distilleries in the United States. Based in New Richmond, Wisconsin, all aspects of production occur at our facility. If you're interested in visiting and learning more about the 45th Parallel Distillery, please check our website and plan a visit to tour our facility and taste our spirits. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org.
This is Access to Democracy, and I'm your host, Bill Raker. Thank you for joining us. We have an interesting topic that we're going to be talking about today. You know, it takes many departments and functions, a lot of professionals, and a number of volunteer advisory commission members to run a city. And all of those things are important, but often we don't stop to think about what really goes on in how a city is operated, what kind of planning that the city goes through when they're looking for the future for the community. And today, on our interview, Access to Democracy, we're going to find out what, why, and how a city planner goes about doing his job, or her job, as the case may be. So we're delighted to welcome the city planner from Eagan, Mike Schultz. Mike, a pleasure to have you on Access to Democracy.
Thanks, Bill. Happy to be here.
There are many things that I'm interested in learning today, and I'm sure our viewers are too. But the first thing I want to start with is, what really is the role, the job of a city planner?
Well, city planner, we basically oversee the zoning and land use requirements of a particular city. So for the city of Eagan, Chapter 11 is our land use regulations that outlines basically all the zoning requirements within a city. So a lot of people are probably familiar with residential zoning, and then we have commercial zoning, industrial zoning, and whatnot. So basically that code directs where certain land uses may or may not go within a particular community. And as part of development, when development occurs, planning usually will then coordinate with other departments, public works and engineering, water resources, parks departments. So we end up coordinating with all those other departments whenever a development comes into a city to make sure that it's abiding by all the requirements within city code.
Now, that's a really important thing because if there's no planning about how a city develops, what would we end up with?
Well, fortunately for the city of Eagan and most metropolitan communities and statewide communities, we do have a comprehensive plan. So basically, that is the guiding plan for a community in which we follow. So that lays out, future land use needs, housing needs, park and rec space needs. So that lays out basically all those, basically what we want to see Eagan to be in the next, 10, 15, 20 years. And that has to be updated every 10 years. And so that's required by the state legislature. So we work with the Metropolitan Council on doing those periodic updates. Just had our last one approved a little over 5 years ago, but it's in the next couple of years that we have to start the process for updating our next comprehensive plan for the 2050 plan. So that document itself basically helps the city in its growth and dictating basically how development or where land uses may occur within a city.
So you're starting to talk a little bit about how you go about doing your job as a city planner. Mm-hmm. And the comprehensive plan sounds like it's really a great, big, important document for the city, right? And it covers what period of time? 10 years? Is it kind of a rolling 10 years? Is that
it's actually 20 years out in the future. 20 years,
okay.
But we have to update it every 10 years. And so by 2030, we'll have to have a plan submitted to Met Council for their review and approval. That will be for the 2050 period, 2030 to 2050 period.
So what kind of data or input do you get or do you have to have in order to construct this plan and keep it current?
So Met Council actually just rolled out their 2050 plan, and what they're asking cities to do is basically follow the guidelines and requirements similar to their plan. So cities will have to analyze housing needs, especially workforce or affordable housing needs. They'll have to analyze open space requirements. A new requirement that they're adding this year is sustainability. How cities are implementing sustainability within their long-range plans. So other aspects such as roads, public infrastructure, that stuff is all included as well within the comp plan.
So how many people are on your team to do all this work, Mike?
So we usually we'll hire usually a professional private consultant that will help us. It is a heavy lift for basically staff to do that by themselves, and so we will usually hire a consultant. We'll basically be involved. We'll usually end up doing some public outreach for citizen involvement as part of that process. So we will rely on the consultant to do a large aspect of it, but we will end up having, staff input, planning commission input, city council input, resident input within that document.
Well, you mentioned the Advisory Planning Commission, a group of volunteers appointed by the city council. What role does that Advisory Planning Commission have, and how do you interface with them or work with them? How important is that to your job?
So Planning Commission, City Council does view all their commissions as very important. They find basically their input and their recommendations important in basically their decision within a matter. So all land use applications first go through the Planning Commission. So the commission will end up holding a public hearing where we usually will send out notification to surrounding property owners. So as part of that, they'll have public notification and public testimony as part of the public hearing. So residents will have the opportunity to comment on a particular application. And usually Planning Commission along with staff will try to answer or address any questions or concerns resident may have on a particular proposal. And so Planning Commission will take all those aspects into consideration, and then they'll forward a recommendation to City Council for their consideration in the matter. So as far as that is concerned, Planning Commission plays a pretty vital role in land use decisions.
So if some citizen would be interested in being on a planning commission, I think here in Eagan the application period is still open for another week or two if they have an interest in volunteering to serve in that capacity. So we'll put in a plug for that.
We'll put in a plug. Yeah, I know Sarah Ehlig was on your show not too long ago, and right now it is open, I believe, until for another 10 days, I believe.
21st, I think.
And so last I heard there was 55 applicants for the open positions. We have currently 5 open positions within Planning Commission. As far as I know, each of the commissioners, I think, were reapplying as far as I know. So, but yeah, if any residents were interested in being appointed, they can certainly apply. There's an interview process that they would ultimately go through with City Council before, if they're appointed.
So Mike, a lot of professionals in the city employment with their departments and their functions have budget responsibilities. Does the planning activity, the planning department have a budget that you are managing?
We do have, each department will have a budget. So planning falls under the community development department. Within the department, there's 3 divisions: planning, building inspections, and now property maintenance is part of that as well. So we each have their own budget. Large part of that is for personnel. We do have some money for, vehicle replacements, special projects, if we have to hire a consultant and whatnot. So, but most of our budget, I would say, a good probably 80% of it is for personnel.
Sure.
So not like public works or parks, where they basically have to start, considering, replacement of equipment or, upgrade of roads or things like that.
So Mike, how long have you been city planner in Eagan?
Well, I've been with the city of Eagan coming up on 6 years. Will be June, will be 6 years. Maybe a little bit more background. Prior to that, I was in Colorado. I was in Colorado Springs for 17 years. And prior to that, I was, one of my first full-time jobs was for the city of Farmington, so another Dakota County community, which was at the time growing quite substantially. So coming right out of the gate out of grad school, I was in Farmington and experienced a lot of growth, especially in the late 90s, early 2000s.
So have all of these segments of your career been as a city planner or working in that capacity?
Yes. Yep. So going on 27 years.
So how does one prepare for a career in city planning?
So I did grow up in southern Minnesota. I went to Mankato State. Initially, I was interested in sociology and geography, but I always had an interest in how cities basically developed. Seeing how roads were laid out, where parks were where they were at, and when I started taking some urban studies classes and GIS classes, I certainly became more interested in maybe seeking that out. So I finished my undergraduate in sociology and geography, applied for the master's program at Mankato State, and then did a 2 years master's program at Mankato.
Well, we're glad you're here with us in Eagan now, bringing in all that experience that you have. What are some of the challenges that a city planner deals with? Maybe in general terms, or if you have a specific example of something here in Eagan, we'd be interested in that as well.
We'll get basically inquiries from developers, quite often. Just before this, Bill, we were talking about the Blue Cross Blue Shield main campus that is up for sale. If people recall, last year there was a proposal for development of that site, basically for a liquor distribution company that wanted to relocate to Eagan. And as you know, it was hotly contested by a lot of the residents within the area. So, so there's those aspects where, sometimes there are proposals to change a land use, from one type to another type, where then it does take people, off guard. And then taking into consideration, what are those impacts, to those residents? Is there a way to mitigate those impacts to those residents? And so there are highly controversial projects that do ultimately come up that as staff, we end up having to field, those resident calls and complaints and at least try to provide some type of response, back to them to at least hopefully they understand, maybe the perspective of the proposal or what's required within the city code.
So sometimes there's kind of a difficult line to walk between a project or a proposal or inquiry that may have some future benefit, significant for the city, but it might not be popular with the residents in the area or the community where the project's being considered.
Yes. So back to the case of the Blue Cross Blue Shield, I think one thing that many cities are experiencing right now is just that return to the office, an office demand in itself has not really recovered, since COVID. And so Blue Cross Blue Shield consolidated to the property across the street, to their campus across the street. They no longer need this building Similarly with Thomson Reuters having to vacate 1 million square feet of office and downsize to approximately 300,000 square feet. I mean, this is a common scenario that's going on throughout the Twin Cities, if not, the country. And so if it's not going to be office, the question is then what is the next logical land use? What's the next use that makes sense for the property? In the case of Blue Cross, it is a little bit more difficult. Access is a concern, that and was brought up during the neighborhood meetings, that how is trucks going to have access to that site and not disrupt residential traffic? And so those are the type of things that we need to take in consideration. Eagan now is kind of in the next phase of its life. It was a lot of greenfield development within Eagan. Now it's going to start to see a little bit more about grayfield or redevelopment occurring within Eagan.
So what portion of the community of Eagan is already built out? Is there much left for new development?
Yeah, I mean, right now, under the Met Council, Eagan is considered actually a fully built-out community. However, there are obviously pockets of development that may still happen. So as far as like a lot of greenfield, undeveloped land within Eagan, there's not a lot of that. But there are a number of sites that have now basically gone defunct. Thomson Reuters, obviously, Metcalf School, a few others that now have seen basically an opportunity for redevelopment to occur on those sites.
So one of the things I think many of us are beginning to hear some discussion about, Mike, something called livable communities. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? And does that pose a challenge for a community, a city like Eagan?
Well, livable communities, is basically intended to bring basically a diversity of housing, to a community that supports all aspects from workforce housing, market rate housing, housing for 65 or 55 plus, but also has aspects of walkable type communities and whatnot. So, as far as Eagan's concerned, I mean, a lot of development Eagan developed in the 80s, largely in the late 70s, 80s, and into the 90s. I think Eagan for the most part is fairly walkable type community, but we do not have a lot of options, to add a large diversity of housing than maybe say the Rosemonts and Lakevilles that are currently building out, right now. So right now we try to work with developers as much as possible to provide, basically a variety of housing that's needed throughout the community.
Well, you mentioned a name that I would like to explore a little bit more with you, Mike, in terms of maybe significant, interesting, important projects going on right now. The name Thomson Reuters came up with respect to that very large campus and physical facility that they once occupied here in Eagan. Mm-hmm. From your perspective as a city planner, what's going on there?
So if I can take you back to the beginning, so when we received word, basically in, I believe it was 2022, that Thomson Reuters made the announcement that they would actually be vacating their office building, 1 million square feet within Eagan. City staff started working with representatives from Thomson Reuters, hopefully to retain Thomson Reuters to stay within town, because they were looking at potentially other options like any business would. Fortunately, we were able to get them to land at the Landing, as it became called, which is located just out by Viking Lakes. So they relocated to 300,000 square feet over there, and as part of that transition, they put the property up for sale. Ryan Companies, a local developer in town, won the bid to purchase the property. So if anybody's gone by the site here recently, you can see the building is now being deconstructed. The office building is being deconstructed. The data centers on the site are being deconstructed. So ultimately what the property is going to become, Amazon has been announced as being a tenant out at that location. And then on the south side, where the existing office building is at, there will be future industrial users on the site. That's still to be announced, exactly who those are. They're still trying to court any users that are interested in that location. And then on our homes is we'll be building a 104 townhome development right at the corner of Elreen and Yankee Doodle. And then there are seven single-family lots that were actually part of the proposal as well. But one of the aspects I think that maybe benefited some of the neighbors located along Elreen, we were able to acquire additional park space as part of the negotiations with Ryan. So there was some park dedication that will preserve a significant amount of trees. There was a conservation easement also that would preserve a significant number of trees. And I know that was an important aspect from the neighbors, along Elreen, is trying to maintain that buffer along that particular area. So I know there's some activity going out there right now. We're getting phone calls with some tree removal and maybe one of the aspects that dealing with residents. But I think the development overall ultimately was a win-win for residents, the city, and also for Ryan companies.
Well, it's interesting to see how a major employer that Thomson Reuters was here for Eagan, for Minnesota, you've been able to transition that space into something very meaningful and very important to the community. A lot of different components of that development. Mm-hmm. And you and your department's been very active in how that planning has taken place and making sure that all of the rules are being observed, I'm sure, right?
Yes, yeah. I mean, just some of the background components. Opperman Road is a private street, and as part of this development, that will become a public street. So working with the developer and engineering, we had to redesign, and that street will be reconstructed to public street standards. There's also a railroad crossing that we ended up having to basically work with the railroad and making sure that easement or that allowance for public street to cross the railroad. The state, with Highway 149 there, we had to have them involved, the county, with Yankee Doodle being a county road, having them involved in that process as well. So having to deal with not only internal departments, but also outside agencies sometimes can get a little complicated.
I'm sure. So, Mike, is there a way to measure or to gauge the kind of development or redevelopment activities that are going on within Eagan right now? Like, I don't know, maybe the number of companies involved or number of projects, the dollar investment, so forth, things like that?
Yeah, and sorry, Bill, I didn't bring those numbers specifically, but usually we will look at building permit valuations as kind of a gauge. So one of our highest years was when the Outlet Mall was proposed, and then another one of our highest years was when Viking Lakes was developed, and so those are probably two of our highest years in probably the past 10, 12 years within Eagan. This year we do anticipate a potentially record year in those valuations with the Amazon facility, Solventum, coming to Eagan and developing within Eagan. Also, Viking Lakes has some projects also proposed, hopefully for still this year, and a number of other projects. So we're anticipating maybe a near record year as far as valuations go.
Well, congratulations. I think it took a lot of work on the parts of a lot of people to bring that much into Eagan, or to keep that much in Eagan. You mentioned Viking Lakes, Mike. Is that project, that development, nearing completion out there?
Bill, I'd probably say that it's probably only about 50% built out right now. So there's a number. They just completed phase 2 of their residential. Phase 3 will be just south of that. There's a wetland open space that's basically the center of that residential area that will be taking place sometime either later this year or next year. They also have some vacant property just south of the Omni Hotel, as well as just to the east of the Omni Hotel. And there's also a vacant piece of ground on their northwest portion of their campus as well. So they do have a number of areas that they still need to develop. Right now that basically they do have CLA finishing out tenant space. firm that's going to be coming in, building out a training facility at Viking Lakes. Lagos Tacos is a restaurant that's going to be going into a space out there. I think that was just announced out there, 6,000 square foot restaurant out there. So still a number of things still happening out at Viking Lakes.
So Mike, we're coming up to the 3 or 4 minutes left in the program, and we've talked quite a bit about what city planning is all about. You've explained how you go about doing it, but maybe one of the things that our viewers would appreciate a little bit more insight on is why. Why do you do what you do?
Yeah, I think for most people, people don't realize what it takes to have a well-managed and well-planned city. I think Eagan is usually recognized as being one of those well-planned cities within the Twin Cities area. We try to balance, basically we're ensuring, residential housing needs, of our residents. We want to continue striving to build up that commercial and industrial for tax-based reasons, which is very important to residents as well, to ensure that some of that commercial and industrial is offsetting some of that residential. So all those aspects are part of planning, and good planning, that happens within a community.
Well, there's a lot going on in Eagan, isn't there?
There is a lot going on in Eagan.
What, in a couple of minutes, what is it you are anticipating that you're going to be dealing with over the next 5 years, let's say?
Well, Bill, I think, as redevelopment continues to occur within Eagan, as I said, the city's now transitioning into kind of a gray field or redevelopment phase, as we see Thomson Reuters, Blue Cross, the Metcalf School, all properties that, basically served its purpose and now are going to be proposed to be redeveloped. And we anticipate that happening, as structures begin to age and other needs come forward, within Eagan. So we do anticipate that, in the future, in the next 5 years, we will have to continue evaluating the office aspects of Eagan. Does that market rebound as far as office needs within Eagan, or are we going to see continued decline in office occupancy within Eagan, and then seeing maybe a different demand taking place, taking over those office needs? So that's one aspect. Housing, I mentioned before, basically is another aspect. Workforce housing is always going to be a need within the Twin Cities area that we'll continue to have to monitor.
So in 1 minute, Mike, any final thoughts that you'd like to leave our viewers with?
Yes, I think in the popularity of social media, there's a lot of misinformation out there. I always encourage residents to contact our planning department or go online to maybe find that information if they're trying to find out what's going on with a development down the street or around the corner from them, or maybe if they even just have some general questions about their own property, if they have a project that they're proposing on their own at their own home. So reach out to planning, and we'll be happy to work with them and answer any questions.
That's a great suggestion to leave with our viewers. And the telephone numbers and the web address for city planning and for Eagan scrolling across our screens as you're watching this program. Mike, it's been a real insight to have you come be a guest on Access to Democracy and to explain to me and to our viewers what, how, and why city planning is all about. Done a great job. We wish you continued success. Thank you for being our guest on Access to Democracy. And thank you, viewers, for joining us today as we chatted with Mike about city planning here in Eagan. And remember, there's more Access to Democracy to watch on accesstodemocracy.com. Thank you for watching.